So here's our third video for Module 6. We've already talked about kind of the general concepts for growth and equity and why they're important. And then we've also talked about the formulas on how you can find actual growth rates, the expected growth rates, and the risk formulas, the standard deviations. Now this is kind of a wrap-up one, and it's just the factors to consider. Because I think it's important to remember that numbers don't make the decision, people make the decision. And so even though we can find those different numbers and stuff, there's still things that as a manager you need to consider in your interpretation of the numbers and the decisions that you make. So in your leverage choice, without risk, as long as our return on assets is greater than the cost of debt, more leverage means higher growth. And it'd be nice to not have any risk, but the reality is that you do have risk. And so with risk, you need to consider the levels of risk relative to your expected growth rate. Higher risk means higher leverage, but also it could mean higher growth. But how much risk do you want to take on? The choice depends on your risk attitude. Some people are going to be more risky and they'll want to take on more risk. They're risk takers. Some people are going to be more risk adverse. And it may also depend upon where you are in your life cycle. A new farmer may want to take on more risk because it's important to grow their business and grow that wealth. And they say, if things really go bad, I've got time to start a new business and do something else. Where somebody maybe that's depending on that business to be their retirement income may want to be fairly stable with that business and not want to risk anything. Lenders' judgment and financing terms may also affect your leverage choice. Just because you think that you want to take on that much risk, your lender might not be willing to. And so it may be difficult to find that much debt financing. Some other issues are proprietor withdrawals. Withdrawals can severely restrain growth. So if you have higher consumption amounts, you're taking more of those profits out of your business, less profit is left there in your business to grow it over time. If wealth accumulation is your most important thing, then you'd have zero or minimal consumption. However, that's not really realistic, and the truth is consumption has value also. I remember growing up, my parents would say as they were farming, my dad was saying, well, we're doing it for tomorrow, look what we're doing, we have to do this and we have to be tight so that we have the money for tomorrow. Mom was saying, but I want to live now. And so there has to be some kind of trade-off there between how much do you want to take out of the business to live now versus how much you want to keep in the business so your wealth will accumulate over time. Income tax and growth. Tax management may be able to have the tax rate be lower. And so sometimes smoothing your income from year to year, keeping yourself out of a higher income tax bracket, things like that can be helpful. However, if there are no profits, there are no taxes. And so sometimes to avoid taxes, people buy extra equipment or other things. If you don't need it, all that's done is decreased your profits. And in fact, you can buy lots of stuff that you don't need so that you have no profits and then you pay zero taxes, but that hasn't helped you accumulate wealth and it hasn't really gone along with what you want in your business. So what you really want to have happen is maximize your after-tax profits. So sometimes buying something this year instead of next year because it makes sense for income tax purposes may be valuable, but just buying a new pickup to buy a new pickup may not increase your equity. Another issue to think about is the resource productivity and growth. How does your R change, your return on assets, as the farm gets bigger? And a lot of times in our formulas here, we just use one set R, but R is going to change over time, and it's also going to change as your business changes. And so thinking about some things that might change are economies of size. If you have your business and you have one combine and your combine's $100,000, I'm probably really underestimating that, and you use that over 1 or 2 acres, it's going to be a really low return on assets. But if you use that over 1,000 acres or 2,000 acres, you're going to have a higher return on assets because you're spreading the cost of that equipment over multiple acres. And so getting bigger can sometimes take advantage of economies of size, so being bigger can mean operating more efficiently and having a higher return on assets. There's also something called diseconomies of size. And this is that as you get bigger, sometimes your R will go down. And this is because sometimes it's easier to use those assets more productively, but also you have a lot more to manage. A guy that I worked for said when he was in high school, when he was in junior high, I think, he had piglets as he raised his 4-H project. So the first year he got 2 little pigs, and he raised them up, and he fed them and watched them, and he made $100. He thought, wow, this is great. So the next year he did 10 pigs instead of 2. So he had 10 baby pigs. He killed 8 of them because he couldn't handle, because they got sick, they had problems, it was hard to manage and everything, and he ended up losing $100. And so he had diseconomies of size. 2 baby pigs he was able to manage and manage well, he made $100, but 10 baby pigs were too much of growth too fast. He couldn't manage 10 pigs, and so he ended up losing money. And in agriculture, sometimes it's the same thing. As a manager, you have to manage everything effectively, and so if you extend yourself out too far, you may not be able to manage anything effectively. Another issue to think about is that many resources are lumpy. That means you have to grow in increments. A lot of times labor, you can hire 1 more person instead of hiring them for just another hour sometimes. Or you have to not just add 5 acres or 10 acres, but sometimes it's another field. And so you may be adding 100 acres or 150 acres or something. And so you really need to kind of balance out where those jumps are going to take you and how they're going to affect your return on assets. And compare that to the cost of the debt that it's going to incur to grow at that lumpy rate. And again, your management capability. A lot of times it's not that you can't do it or you can do it, but you may have to have a level of growth that's really sustainable that can keep pace with your management capability. As you grow your business over time, hopefully you're going to get better at managing your business, better at understanding where it needs to be, and be able to manage things easier. So over time you become a better manager, but you may not be able to do that all at once. And again, numbers don't make decisions, people do. So all of these things, the formulas, these other considerations, you as a manager and owner, you have to think about all of these things in deciding what is the optimal amount of debt and leverage and the way that we're going to run our business.